Okay, here we go. We're in the airlock area, entering the cheese room. We have Sarah Spring, cheesemaker for Spring Day Creamery.
I'm about to disinfect my shoes.
Okay, why do you need to disinfect your shoes?
Because you don't want stray bacteria in the room.
Okay, so bacteria are important to cheese making.
Yep.
All right.
There's certain bacteria that are good bacteria and certain that are not good. So we're just trying to eliminate anything that might come from the outside, especially since we have chickens and pigs and dogs and cats.
Okay, I'll disinfect my shoes here. Here we go, disinfecting. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
And so I get the milk.
You get the milk, and then what else? What do you need to do with it?
And then with these, I get the milk in these cans.
Okay, now why is it important that these cans are stainless steel?
Because they don't react to acid, and it doesn't react with the milk.
So far I've heard there's quite a bit of biology and chemistry involved in cheese making. It's really important, isn't it?
It is. And so then I would put this can of milk, actually much heavier, it weighs 8.6 pounds per gallon.
And how many gallons does that hold?
7.5. So
okay.
It's a little bit heavy for me.
Mathematics are involved if you want to figure out how much you're lifting.
So then I actually pump up the scissor table with the milk in it in the can.
Oh, okay, so interesting. You have physics involved. Keep pumping.
Mm-hmm. And I get it up so that it's higher than where I'm going to, where the milk level is going to end up in this vat.
Okay.
And so then I actually use a very high-tech pump. So this gets hooked eventually to the side of the can, and the milk is then transferred by siphoning into, so it usually takes one stroke.
Yep.
And the milk begins to flow into the vat, and this vat holds 40 gallons.
That's a lot of milk that could go in that vat.
Usually I do 20 gallons. So I do 2 of these cans in one 5-gallon bucket that's been lined with food-grade plastic so that nothing reacts to the milk, and so we know that it's clean. Everything has to be sanitized at about between 100 and 200 parts per million chlorine.
Now, can you show us some of your cheeses that you have here, and just tell us what we're looking at?
Well, this is called Viande Rose.
Okay, now what makes this cheese come out different from these other cheeses that I see?
Well, this cheese is going to be more firm because it is the curd has been cultured with beneficial bacteria, so the milk's been acidified, and then when it's acidic enough, when it's dropped enough in pH, then you add rennet, and rennet causes the milk to coagulate, and it sits for a certain amount of time based on the amount of time it takes for the milk to flocculate, which is when everything stops moving and you know that it's starting to set. So you calculate the time of flocculation, usually about between 5 and 10 or 12 minutes, and you multiply that number by 4 or 6, depending on what kind of cheese it is, and you let it sit for that amount of time. And then this particular one involved cutting the curd once it was had been set after about 40-45 minutes.
Now you cut the curd. Do you ever have to cut the cheese?
Yes. However, that did kind of throw me off. Now I've kind of lost my train of thought. But this curd gets cooked. So once it's cut, it begins to expel whey, which is the watery part of cheese. You've heard of Little Miss Muffet, who was eating her curds and whey. So she was eating the curd, the solids, and the liquid part. So this gets heated a little bit. The curd gets heated 2 degrees every 5 minutes over a period of about 40 minutes, and the curd becomes more firm, and then it is put in a mold, and it is very lightly pressed. And I actually use high-tech free weights to do this. So here's a 10-pound weight. So those each had a 10-pound weight.
So you put 10-pound weights, you put those weights, 10 pounds, on top of these cheeses, to press out the water.
Yeah, to press out the whey. And
okay.
So then it compresses.
So we've got some simple physics going on here, but that actually helps you make that cheese.
Right, and so if I had put more weight, say if I'd put 20 pounds on there, it would have removed a lot of moisture, so it would have become a much more, it would become a harder cheese that could be aged for a long time.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, isn't it? This is the same cheese as this, only this was not, the curd was not heated and it was not stirred. So this one...
So did that do anything different to the bacteria, or what made it different?
It means that there's more moisture in the cheese, so the bacteria works more quickly.
Okay.
And so these all have ripening bacteria in them, and in addition to the acidifying bacteria, and some of them will turn. They will turn kind of a reddish color. I don't know if you can see this one. It's starting to turn.
Yeah, we see that. Yep.
Yep. So that's something that's called bacteria linens. And what I do is I make a solution of brine, salt, and water, and bacteria linens. This thing called bacteria linens, and a yeast that's called Geotrichum 15. And I stir those together, and I let them sit for a day or so, and then I put on gloves, and I take each of these cheeses, and I put some of this solution on each of them. I don't like dunk them in it. I just kind of moisten all the cheeses with that, and eventually, in the right conditions, at 50 degrees, this is 50 degrees, 52 degrees, 54 degrees. That's the temperature where those molds and bacteria operate the most actively.
It sounds like you've got some interesting biological and chemical and physical type of reactions and things that you have to really get a handle on to make cheese. But can you tell us your background? Now, did you come as an expert in chemistry and biology? How did you get into this?
Well, you really want to know the truth?
We do.
I was a French major. I'm a linguist. And
wait, so you're saying that even if we're not expert chemists or biologists, we can learn how to do something as complex as cheese?
Yes, yes. And this is a case of applying a lot of the math that I paid no attention to in high school.
That's great.
And it would have made a lot of sense to me had my instructors way back then connected what we were doing to something that was as real as making cheese or some other thing. But I use math all the time. And I usually, when I salt, because you have to salt cheese, when it's draining, it helps it to drain. It pulls the moisture out, and the salt is a really important component, and I have figured out the exact percentage per weight of cheese, and it's much easier to weigh these things that are, I mean, things like salt, it's much easier to weigh it in grams than to weigh it in ounces. So I do all of this using a metric system, and then before I sell, then I convert it all to ounces. But the dairy inspector thinks it's very funny that I do it that way, but it works, it's pretty precise.
Thank you so much for that tour. It's
You're welcome.
great to see a practical application of science from someone who didn't start as an expert, and then you became an expert in this, using science to make cheese. Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome.
All right. Spring Day Creamery, Sarah Spring, cheesemaker. And where can people buy your cheese?
Brunswick Winter Market on Saturdays.
All right. Well, we'll see you there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.